started, I kind of want to know who we're talking with. I'd rather say it that way than talking to. How many of you are artists? And how many of you are collectors? And how many of you are neither? Okay. I really appreciate what Ray and Steve have initiated here with the Startup Fair, because as many of you know, unless you are an artist who is represented by a gallery, you really don't have a chance of being in an art fair. And so this provides that opportunity to unrepresented artists. And I think that's an interesting topic that we can touch upon at some point here, because what is the perceived value of an artist who doesn't have representation? Should it matter? Should it matter in terms of how good you think their work is, or how expensive or inexpensive it should be? So those are some things that I think we might want to ponder, or that you can also chime in and help us out with. So thank you for meeting me at a motel in the middle of a Saturday afternoon.
It's the best proposition I've had in 20 some odd years. It's awesome.
Not only did they actually consider it, but they accepted the request. And considering how busy they are, I really sincerely appreciate being here. I am going to introduce them, and I'm going to read it just because there's so much for each one of them. LinkedIn was down today, so if I've said anything that of your achievements or your endeavors, your current endeavors, it's wrong, please help me out. I'll start with Katrina. She's the director and founder of Traywick Contemporary. She started Traywick Gallery in 1997, and that became Traywick Contemporary and Projects in 2005. She's been involved in the Bay Area art community since 1990, when she began her career with positions at Crown Point Press and Paulson Bott before founding Traywick Gallery in Berkeley. She's a member of the San Francisco Art Dealers Association and Art Table, which is a national organization of professional women in the arts. And she's a regular and enthusiastic supporter of many Bay Area nonprofit art venues, including Southern Exposure, Headland Center for the Arts, San Francisco Camera Work, and our very own San Francisco Institute of Contemporary Art. Thank you very much for all that you do for us. Traywick Contemporary, as I said, is in Berkeley and is located in a former Masonic temple. If you haven't been there, you should definitely check it out. And it is also the home for Katrina and her family. The program extends beyond the traditional media and often includes site-specific installations and commissions that respond to the architecture of this Masonic temple and home. And then it also extends beyond the walls of the gallery for off-site projects and art fairs and other exhibitions. Nion McEvoy is the owner, chairman, and CEO of Chronicle Books, where he started in 1986 as the editor-in-chief of the adult trade division. Before entering the publishing world, Nion worked in the business affairs departments of the William Morris Agency and Westcom Productions. His family also owns a 556-acre ranch in Petaluma that produces organic olives harvested for olive oil and beauty care products. He's an avid art collector, philanthropist, lawyer, and rock drummer. I went out to dinner with him in Houston a few weeks ago, and I'm like, do you drum? The chopsticks, the pen, it was all gone. As well as a former bartender and meditation and yoga teacher. I was really glad to be able to dig that stuff up. Currently, he serves on the boards of SF Jazz, the UCSF Foundation, and the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, where there's nothing going on, so it makes sense that he would be here today.
Nothing to see there.
Yeah. According to their website, Chronicle Books is inspired by the enduring magic and importance of books. Their objective is to create and distribute exceptional publishing that is instantly recognizable for its spirit, creativity, and value. Words that people use to describe Chronicle Book publications are clever, colorful, beautiful and eye-catching, eclectic, playful, witty, creative, delightful, and imaginative. And I'm sure for those of you familiar with Chronicle Books, I think those all hold true. David Hornik is A general partner at August Capital for more than a decade, David has worked with technology startups throughout the software sector and invests broadly in information technology companies. Prior to joining August Capital, David was an intellectual property and corporate attorney. He's the author of Venture Blog, the first venture capital blog, and Venture Cast, the first venture capital podcast, and is the founder and executive producer of the Lobby Conference, an annual gathering of the thought leaders of the digital media ecosystem. He has, to say the least, an eclectic educational background with a BA in computer music from Stanford and a degree in criminology from Cambridge University, as well as a law degree from Harvard Law School. He and his wife Pamela are also avid art collectors, and David is often the subject of Pamela's prolific Facebook postings.
Amazing.
Although their dog Teddy outshines David and their 4 children on that platform.
Yes, that is true.
August Capital is a venture capital firm created by David Marquardt and John Johnson in 1995. They started the firm to invest in companies differentiated by technical innovation and entrepreneurial excellence. According to the website, they believe in communication and entrepreneurship as a team sport. They proclaim that they are here to help you change the world. Okay, words to live by. So, thank you again all for being here. This topic for our conversation, assessing the value of creativity, actually came to me while I was at another panel discussion about chasing the unicorn, and it paired a Bonham's art specialist with a venture capitalist to talk about, that next great thing that everybody was going to make $1 million on, or $1 billion these days. And it just got me thinking about how people in roles of, deciding on investing in whatever the thing might be, how they assess value in something as ambiguous as an idea or just creativity in and of itself. So I think before we get to how do you assess the value of creativity, I'd like to talk about how you each define value. Does it have a price tag, a dollar sign in front of it, or is it more than that? Nion, do you wanna kick us off here?
Oh, sure, that's an easy one.
Yes.
No, I mean, I sometimes will say, who wants to know? Because, as with many questions, it really depends who you're talking to and what aspect or element of value. Is it, does it have intrinsic value, whatever that may be, or does it have value to you personally? Is it, and this is something you're thinking of acquiring, is it a good investment? Would it look good over your sofa? I mean, if it's a piece of, so things can have value in a lot of different spheres, and it's important to know really what you want and what you're looking for, and what would be additive to your life, and then I think it has value for you. In our books, when we talk about spirit, creativity, and value at Chronicle Books, it's a little different because it's our hope that the books will not only have some vitality and some cleverness and also a very serious degree of craftsmanship, but also that we can bring them in at a retail price that makes them affordable and makes you think, oh yeah, for that, I definitely get that. Instead of having it be daunting or in general making something so lofty that you are only inviting a very few people to the party. So we like to try to make it a little more democratic, a little more available and inclusive, and that's what, when we think of value, we think you're getting more, just a little bit more than you're paying for.
And David, when you meet with an entrepreneur who's got the next new idea, I won't mention the T word quite yet, how do you assess the value of that person's idea, which I'm assuming starts really as an idea?
Yeah, no, it's sort of an impossibility.
I mean, no.
That's, yeah, exactly. Thank you very much.
No.
No, it's a tricky thing. I mean, when we see companies, they are nascent, and they are basically they exist only in the heads more or less of the entrepreneurs who are creating them, and so you get to say, okay, well, this is an interesting combination. So it's sort of like if you were gonna buy a piece of art before it's been painted, right? You have a painter, you have Paul sitting there. He's got paint. He's looking at it. And he says, I'm gonna create this Tony Serra portrait, and you say, I think that'll be great. I'm pretty sure that the combination of you and your skills and this idea for something amazing will turn into something valuable, right? And that's sort of that is my job, and so you can imagine at that point in time, it's much more about the artist, in my instance, the entrepreneur, than it is about the idea.
Right.
It's like
That was my
an
next question.
incredibly skilled, thoughtful entrepreneur like Trina's husband, who I backed, has a great idea. You say,
Full disclosure.
Yeah, full disclosure. Right? You say, that's a great idea, and more importantly, I have worked with you in the past. I'd love to work with you, and again, let's go figure out if we can make that thing happen, right? And
So
that's sort of it.
It's the people who are coming to you, are they often kind of proven entrepreneurs? Do you ever get somebody like totally green?
Oh, all the time.
Okay.
All the time. In fact, I wrote a blog post. My blog post was about those entrepreneurs who or you imagine emerging artists, whatever, who have no track record, have no background, have no history with me, and I called it. I wrote about how do you gain credibility when you have none, right? You have no credibility. I see 22-year-olds who say, by the way, give me $10 million and I'll totally turn it into more. And you say, says who? And then it's my job to say, all right, well, that kind of makes sense. And in fact, I have a company where it was just that, 22-year-olds who said, we're going to rethink how financial services work. And it's like, really? Financial services? That's a terrible idea. But I liked them so much. They were so thoughtful and smart and energetic that I said, okay, fine. In that instance, the initial was only $1 million, but still, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, it is. So, Katrina, if an artist, kind of like an entrepreneur, comes to David who's got no proof of, product, if an artist comes to you with zero exhibition history, you don't really know, much about this person at all, how do you assess the value of what they are presenting to you?
Well, I mean, it is a little bit around what he was saying. It's a little bit of the person, and it's a little bit of what they're making and how they talk about what they're making. And you have to have a belief in the person and their ability to sustain something over a long period of time, and to be committed and working hard, because talent will only get you so far. You really have to put thousands of hours into something. So I'm looking for things that not only visually and intellectually stop me in my tracks with everything we all see. We're all visual people. If you're here, you're looking at the world, and anything that stops you and resonates with you in some way ends up bringing value to me. And then beyond that, if they've got a body of work in the studio, I tell every single artist that I talk to that it's got to be going on in the studio, because if that's ground zero. It is not happening there. It can't happen anywhere else. So if they don't have an exhibition history and you go into the studio and they've got one piece to show you and they can't really talk about it and they have nothing else to back that up, they've got some more work to do before I can offer them anything. I mean, there's some track record somewhere.
So even something that stops you in your tracks, if it's a flash in the pan, then you can't really keep going with that artist.
And I usually am slow when I'm working with artists and watching them over a little bit of time before we start working together, and seeing that they do have a commitment and a long-term focus, and they're committed to honing their practice and skills and being in the studio.
I'll tell you, I love the idea of, for me, it's definitely about the entrepreneur and how they can talk about what they're doing and then their ability to turn it into it. And it's interesting to hear you say the same. I was recently with my wife on a tour of LA, and we went to Sterling Ruby's studio, and it was like an art history lesson. He didn't look the part. He had the hat, the biker hat, and whatever. And then he started talking about his work, and he could place it in the entire history of art in a way that was so incredibly compelling. And so you realize, like, okay, you can't just, maybe if you're completely amazing, then you just go, just look at it. But it sure helps when you're stirring the ruby, because then you go, well, holy cow, I'm missing something here.
Right.
That's
Well,
amazing.
Not all artists are great at talking about their work, which I can step in and help them out a little bit, but in all art, I think, is a little bit of imitation. They're all, we're all looking at things and transformation and adopting and reworking and rethinking, and it's that next step. It's like taking all these ideas, coming up with new ideas, and then getting them out there in a way is key.
So Nion, when you decide to back a book project or an author, what is that kind of sweet spot for you of, making sure that it aligns with the things that Chronicle Books stands for, even if it's not a fully evolved project?
Well, there's some things that we do extremely well and that people look to us for. And so they have to do with sort of a very strong design and a sense of, often a sense of playfulness, and it can be in certain categories, whether it's humor or pop culture, or performing arts or food or some photography. Those areas, we not only do we understand them from a design and production point of view, but also we know all the channels we can sell them in, and we can think through, it's where will this sell? Independent bookstores will sell chains. Will Amazon be the primary customer? Answer, yes, probably. But otherwise, can we sell it in Urban Outfitters or Crate and Barrel? Things that are non-traditional retail out. And so that we have little teams who will sit together looking like little cabals, thinking about certain subject areas, and be editors to make sure that that there's the quality of the editorial, the writing, and the clarity of the concept are there, and then designers and production people and marketing people to make sure that all of those areas are looked at as the thing is being formed, and so that it will not only be, the idea will be realized as well as possible, but realized for the markets it's likely to go into and the people who are likely to want to buy it. You kind of want to get all those things aligned, and then things seem to work out better. So there's some projects that I might personally love that won't really work for Chronicle. We're just not the right publisher. No matter how good it is, they would be better served by maybe a more literary publisher, for example, or a business publisher, somebody who's really deep in that niche. So it's not just a question of is it good, it's also is it good for us, for what, and can we do a good job of it and make it a success?
Right, exactly, because that is part of it. Like, we all love things, we all lust after things, we all, can admire so much, whether it's literature or art or an idea and a product, but they don't necessarily align with some of the missions that have been sort of set forth by our companies or ourselves to guide us. So you've talked a bit about the kind of metrics that you use and the different considerations that go into picking a product. David, can you talk about some of the metrics besides you're a cool entrepreneur, I get you, and this might make some money. So what are the other things that August Capital thinks about before they make a 7-figure investment?
Yeah, it sort of depends. For that first million, nothing. Literally.
Take note, everybody. How's your dance card looking next week?
Exactly. No, it really does depend on the stage of the business. So sometimes people come in and they have an interesting idea, and you're betting on that person creating value out of whole cloth. And you say, and there are no metrics. In fact, the very first deal I did, this was not. This was these gentlemen I was talking about before. So when you go and look at an investment, there are 5 of us in the partnership, and you say, this is maybe an interesting idea, and then you do what's called diligence. doing diligence basically is just you call a bunch of people they know. And you say like, hey, what do you think of this person? And so I was talking about these particular entrepreneurs, and my partner's like, well, who'd you talk to? What'd you find out? And I was like, who am I going to talk to? Like their mother? What do you It's like, I talked to them. I had a long conversation with them. I'm absolutely convinced that they'd be amazing, smart individuals. On the other hand, you find entrepreneurs who've worked in industry for a long time, and you talk to lots of people that they've talked to. Now, as business progress and get further along, and the price goes up, that price is reflected by their ability to have demonstrated that this is a good idea. And the way you demonstrate that is all sorts of things, right? In the consumer world and consumer internet, it may be that you've made $0 million, but you have millions of people who are using your thing, whatever that thing may be. I mean, when I first met with Twitter, they had hundreds of thousands of people on the application, and when I said, so how are you thinking about monetizing it, they said, we aren't. I was like, oh, okay, well that sounds like a great investment. Here are millions of dollars, And then I have other, I have a company now that will do $500 million in revenue this year and be profitable. That's good. It's hard. It is likely very valuable if the company is gonna make $500 million in revenue and be profitable. Here's the thing that's most interesting, and this may be interesting for in the art world, which is that momentum actually matters. The how you're doing. So if this company makes $500 million this year, having done $250 million last year, it's extremely valuable. It has made a huge amount of progress. And if the next year it makes $1 billion in revenue, then that is a $10 billion company, and we are extremely happy. If the next year it makes $501 million in revenue, it's maybe worth $500 million. And if the next year it makes $502 million, it's probably not worth anything.
Wow.
That's just how it is about, in the tech world, it's about growth, and it's about change, and it's about forward motion. And I don't know, I think that's an interesting question for both of you. I mean, as to whether that's true of your businesses. But at least from a value standpoint, it is not sufficient to be valued, to be consistently valued. You have to be doing better every year.
Well, that's interesting in terms of pricing with artwork. If it starts out overvalued, it's not a good scenario, is it?
No, you can't go backwards.
Right.
Yeah.
That pretty much makes things stop.
And have you had instances?
Well,
where
I've
that's happened?
definitely had artists who are established approach me to work with them, and they're sometimes in that spot where they've worked, and their prices have gotten to a certain place, and they're sort of stuck. And sometimes I feel like I can help them, and sometimes I can't. So I mean, it just depends. But I think the more important question is around the long term, and trying to, that there's more of should be more of a slow burn, I think, with most anything. But a lot of things that shoot up in interest, attention, price, are going to crash in some capacity. And so I'm more interested in stretching things out over a long, slow process, and really building it and making sure it's strong along the way. And of course, when there are those moments when someone's getting a lot of attention, you have to make the most of it and go quickly. But in terms of, there's two different things. It's one, telling the artist how to manage that, and one is helping clients not get too caught up in other people's perceptions and getting caught up in price, or getting caught up in what they should be buying, and really stopping and listening to themselves and learning about the work. And part of my job is making sure they're paying attention to all of those parts. And most of the artists I work with over a period of time, there's something there, there's substance, they've been at it, there's a history, there's provenness, and then on top of that, it's then they've got to love it.
So momentum is a little bit different. It's almost a little, the speed of momentum should be much slower.
I prefer that.
Yeah, right.
I'll tell you something that's just, this is totally a side note, but I gave a talk once, but there's this idea of viral marketing, which is that you use these online things and then you spread them to your friends and they spread them to their friends. Things grow really quickly. And so I gave a talk once on viral marketing, and it was called "Everything I Know About Viral Marketing I've Learned from Syphilis." And it was actually a study of immunology, and it was the study of actual viruses. And so what you described turns out to be 100% true of viruses. If viruses grow really quickly, they actually die really quickly. Their decay rate is very much akin to their growth rate. And it turns out that by and large in the internet, the same thing is true, that if something grows at an extraordinary rate, unless it does what good viruses do, which is to morph like the cold, it will fall just as quickly. And so I think this is true. I think this is true of these this is an amazing moment in time. Well, it's a moment in time.
Right.
And what we're all looking for are those franchise things, right? My partners were the earliest investors in Microsoft, Sun, Compaq, Intuit, Symantec, Skype, right? These are things where they were growing, but they became meaningful over a long period of time, right? And you hope to find that, you hope to find the author who consistently creates amazing stuff, and that each book grows on the value of the one prior, and the same thing with artists. Mm-hmm. So I think that our jobs are all very similar, and they're equally precarious at every moment.
Right. Well, and I do want to get to timing. I'm kind of wondering where you came up with this whole, virus thing, whether it was in computer music or criminology classes. But anyway, that's a fascinating little factoid. What about timing, Nion? That was one thing you kind of didn't touch upon in all of the sort of metrics that you did mention. Where does timing factor in terms of, this some great idea or subject that is particularly relevant at that moment in time and may not be later?
Right. Well, I mean, you have to really be careful if you're doing things that are, popular at that moment, because it takes a while for a book to be written, designed, sent out to reviewers, hit the store. So it's about, you could maybe think of an 18-month process ordinarily, and it can go much longer, and you can speed it up, but you have to be really, sure, know why and what you're doing. Right. And so I tend to rely more on people, good editors, I think, are people who really have their antennas out there, and so they see so much stuff that when something really exciting kind of breaks through, and that then they can begin to pursue that, and about that timeline is about 18 months or 2 years, so that when it becomes popular, you really want to be as an early adopter of ideas and trends and passions, and I think you do that by overexposure to ideas and trends and passions until you kind of, sort of had it with them, and then something actually excites you, and then you kind of go with it. And otherwise, I was going to say, one of the things we try to do is actually, it's not as though we try to publish nothing but bestsellers or super hot authors. We try to publish a range of things that do well. And then if something does incredibly well, then that's when it's for everybody, profits and succeeds. So we've had, for example, a couple, as it happens, for the last over 4 years now, we've had 2 books in the top 10 of the children's book bestseller list on the New York Times, the illustrated. And one of them called Press Here by a French author, translated into English, and it's been, as I say, on the bestseller list for 4 years and is still on the list. And then, another book, Good Night Construction Site. It's not as everybody said, oh, this will be the next, anything. There was a good young editor who saw the manuscript and said, that would probably be good with that illustrator we saw the other day, and put them together, and that's been an incredible success, and a building sort of franchise for us. But I think you can't run a business just for hits, or you can get into real trouble. You just have to kind of run it for solid things that are really good, and you'll be happy with them if they just perform as you expected. So that when they do better than that, that's when everything.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think you're all kind of in that place where you're only going to know success from the rearview mirror, ultimately. Like, once that company does so well, once that book sells so great, once that you know, all your collectors are clamoring for that artist, you know? I mean, it just seems like it's a leap of faith.
One of the things that any venture capitalist who's been reasonably good at their job over some reasonable period of time is a list of companies they said no to that kills them, right?
Yeah.
And I suspect it's the same, right? The book
Yes.
you turned down, the artist you
yes.
didn't represent, where you sort of sit there and you
The
go,
art you didn't buy,
Yeah.
Right,
and you
yeah.
could afford it.
No,
Yeah.
exactly. And you say, like, it's in retrospect, you're an idiot. Like, oh my God, I had all these opportunities. And so all you can do is hope that the choices you do make are good choices, that you're finding a good set of authors, that you're finding a good set of artists, yet you're investing in a reasonable set of companies, because, you know, it'd be great, right? It is not, whoever that, I can't remember the name of the editor who said, okay, this Harry Potter thing might have legs, right? Good for that
Oh, that
person,
was our
right?
former intern, actually. who
Right,
said that.
exactly.
And then got fired after that by Harry Potter's publisher. But
Right,
anyway,
exactly. So
amazing.
exactly. So you know,
Yeah.
Amazing.
you have that, and you know, and in the same regard, the fact that I turned down some of the most interesting businesses, you know, that exist today. You could spend your day feeling bad about it, which I do, or you could say, like, there will always be another, right? That's the other thing I will say about this business, about intellectual property, is that unlike fossil fuels, it doesn't run out, right? Eventually you've used up all the fossil fuels and you're like, well, that's it. Shame we're oil men, you know? But every one of our businesses has an infinite resource of creativity that turns into value,
great
right?
point.
And so eventually there'll be another one, and the only question is, do we get them, you know? So we're busy. We're still always, you know, it's like sharks. If you stop looking, you die. But there will always be more. You know, we just got to keep
So
going.
true. It's so true. Nion, you were going to make a point earlier.
Oh, I was just going to say, you know, when you were talking about metrics, that you know, BookScan, which gives you general sales for books around the country, prior performance, sales history, all these metrics are data points.
Right.
They're important, but if you just rely on those, you know nothing. I mean, you actually have to sort of muster all your experience and instincts and
Right.
say, hey, this is going to work, and this is, you know.
Right.
But so all that stuff is good, but it's not dispositive. It's
Data's
not the
nothing
final.
unless
yeah.
you know how to analyze it and work with it.
Yeah.
So
or brush it aside.
right,
Yeah,
ignore
right.
it. So Nion has all these editors out about who are doing a lot of the work for him. You do not have all those people.
No.
So how
No.
do you stay on top of and perhaps ahead of, you know, the au courant things going on with contemporary art and artists?
You just look as much as you can. I will say every art fair that we participate in, and when I'm in a city for a week in that capacity, it's not only being in the art fair and seeing my colleagues and some of the artists that they're featuring and interesting things that are happening in other places that I wouldn't have been able to see firsthand otherwise. But also, you know, thank God for the interweb. It's a really good way to just get a quick glimpse, and then I can kind of keep my eye on things from a distance, and then when I'm in that city, seek it out and look at it. And just a lot of looking. I talk to people all the time. My artists are an amazing resource.
Mhm,
You know,
yeah.
over the 20 years that I've been working, the majority of my successful long-term relationships have come from my introductions from the artists that I'm already working with. And so you are constantly looking.
Yeah.
And that's when you do have to trust yourself when something comes up out of the many things you're seeing and it stops you. That's significant. You think about all the things that just don't even stick with you. You don't even
Right.
remember seeing them. So for better or worse, if it can't quite figure it out or I don't like it at all, the fact that I even thought that
It brought some
is
passion
huge.
to it.
Yes, that I hadn't thought about it is important because there's a lot that you just dismiss as
That turns out not to be the same in the venture business. If I don't like it at all, that's really a bad sign.
well,
That's just,
if I don't
that's
like
just
it,
bad.
It
That's
may
just
not be
bad.
the right fit for me, but it may
So,
still be something
I
interesting.
noticed on the Chronicle Book website that you actually accept submissions, And not only do you accept submissions, but you say that you will actually review every submission that comes.
Oh, I mean, yes.
Might
you
want to
do.
double check that, but yeah, as of yesterday, yes.
Okay, great.
And you know, I mean, I know with the ICA we do have a submission page, but we have some really specific things that we're looking for at any given time, and don't contact us about anything else because we don't have the bandwidth. I'm assuming it's the same for you, and I do think that that's, you know, a matter of the scale of the business too. I mean, I think that's an amazing, and I'm probably guessing a rather unique
Well,
approach.
Yes, but you know, one thing, because we're primarily, we do a lot of visual books where the visual element is the driver, it's not quite the same as having people send you their novel.
Right.
You know, or stacks of things that you know would actually have to read through. But you can go fairly quickly through, you know, and get a sense of whether it's got any heat, if you will, or you know, any interest to you and any commercial potential. You know, you can say, is it art or not? Okay. Either way, it's not the final question.
Right.
And you just have to decide what it is and whether it's going to be culturally resonant. And that's the only difference I would say between what you were saying and what my experience is that I feel I have to be somewhat culturally omnivorous. So I mean, I don't only have to look at art. I mean, I have to, you know, read this and listen, hear that music and see this movie. And, you know, you kind of put all that together and figure out what's going on in the culture. And I think it all sort of feeds in.
Omnivorous and agnostic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, David, you do you have to do those pitching things? Can you talk a little bit about that circus?
Yeah, I mean, so basically,
It's kind of an art fair, except
yeah, my email exists.
I'm pitching.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. No, you can find me on the internet, and that
I'm
you know,
well aware,
Hornik
thank
at
you.
augustgap.com. In any given year, I probably get 1,000 submissions, equivalent of, you know, business plan like submissions in my inbox, and I do read all of them, which tends to be a lot of work to go through everything. I meet with 100 of them. I get serious about that. I'm serious about maybe 10. I focus on the 5, and I fund maybe 2. Right, and so 1,000 possibilities to 2 investments. And it's just a path, right? And the thing that's most interesting to this idea of like the open submission is that it turns out that I've been in VC now for 16 years, so let's call it 15,000 plans that have come to me. How many of those came to me weren't introduced to me by someone I know that I funded? 0.
Mm-hmm.
Not a single one came in that kind of, hey, check it out, hey David, I read about you on the web or whatever. So in my world, it's sort of like your artists, the entrepreneurs I work with, the people I know in the entrepreneurial universe are really that scout system who say, hey, David, you should take a look at this thing because this entrepreneur is smart or this, and that. I think we all have to sift through information
Right.
some way or other, and
Exactly.
the filter of this incredible smart, web of people is the best possible way we have to get there.
And I would say in terms of curatorial projects that we take on, often it really is about, my colleagues who are coming to me and saying, I really think you should look at this artist, Katrina, or any other of the dealers, and they aren't necessarily artists that they represent, which I appreciate as well, although they very well may be, and that's fine too. So often the projects that we take on come to us through those kinds of collegial channels rather than through an open submission where people are just sending you stuff.
Or through PhotoFest, where
Through PhotoFest.
we both attended recently, where the reviewers, and Cathy and I were both reviewers at PhotoFest, will go through a minimum of 14 portfolios a day for 4 days, and over a number of years of doing that, I've done it in Houston and at Photo Lucida in Portland, Oregon, and Palm Springs Photo, and so far I've published one person from that, but also have found a number of photographers who I could potentially would be eager to hear more from and see what their next projects are. but that's also a way that we, step out of our offices and meet people and see things.
Right, and it's a bit, I mean, it's not an art fair, but it's a way to see a lot of work in a short period of time. Some work that makes your eyes bleed, and then some work that is super exciting, that it's that sweet spot where you're going, wow. And in fact, I'm bringing an artist from Photo Fest to the ICA in June. That's how fast I was able to turn that around, because we have a little kind of flexible space that her work works absolutely perfectly. And in years past, I've brought, I don't know, 10 to 12 artists in a single year, maybe not quite that fast, but
Really?
through the Photo Fest process. So, these kinds of forums, much like Photo Fest, I mean, they really do give the exposure that I think is a valuable way to get your work out there and for us to be able to see things. So I just want to kind of get to that. Well, first I want to ask, and I think I think maybe you've answered it, but I just want to sort of talk about it a little bit. Who are you investing for? Is the ultimate investment for Chronicle Books, or is it for that creative person who is bringing you a project? Is it ultimately Traywick Contemporary, and how you do in terms of the success of your business, and is it ultimately the bottom line for August Capital? And maybe you guys can just quickly do that, and then we can open it up to some questions. Nion, you wanna?
It's complicated. I think it's actually a cocktail of those various things, or a sliding scale. Because I remember talking to a publisher, David Godine, a sort of eccentric publisher from New England, who once said there are two kinds of publishers: ones who see themselves as the dutiful custodian of the artist's work, and the other who think, God damn it, I bought it, I'm going to make it the best book, that I can't. And he said sometimes artists are actually better served by the second kind of publisher, because they're really, it's not, because then they are bringing to bear also their expertise and working in a collegial way with that artist, author. So I think it's, I could say that I probably have a fiduciary responsibility to Chronicle Books. At the same time, having been an editor there, and I also feel and the editor is sort of the bridge between the company and the author and the company. I've also and coming from a background of William Morris, where I represented artists, and so I always feel close to the artist, and I feel it's got to win for them. If it's going to win for us, it's got to win. It's got to be, all over. And so, and I think people sometimes acquire things to build their own career as editor as well. I think sometimes it's, they think about the company, they think about themselves, they think about the artist, and it should all be part of the mix.
Right. Katrina?
So, pretty straightforward for me. If the artists succeed, the gallery succeeds. So everything that we do is setting them up to succeed in the best way possible, getting enough studio time, trying to take some stuff off their plates so that they can just be focused there, doing whatever we can to set them up in the best possible light to really do their best work and to get out in the world in the best way possible. So that's, my focus is always on the artist, and that's partly why we take so much time and getting married to an artist.
Right. And it also, it kind of reflects a little bit of the kind of back story of, or the investment part that people don't necessarily understand or are not aware of, that it is about those things as well as mounting an exhibition and trying to get their work sold or into a collection. It's all of that other back office, for lack of a better term, things that dealers do to support their artists getting things off their plate.
A lot. Life coaching.
David?
Yeah, I mean,
what comes first?
The venture business is tricky because my job is very clear. I raise money from foundations and universities, and it's Yale, it's the Ford Foundation, it's whatever, and my only job is they give me $500 million and say, turn this into more than $500 million, right? So say, all right, I guess I serve them, and I'm just a financial services guy. But the reality is the product that I'm selling is successful entrepreneurs, right? It's investing in companies and making those companies successful, and that's not really about me, and it's not really about August. It's about putting money into a company and having it be successful. And so, so I think I'm this strange combination of a financial services guy, which makes me really sad, and a service provider, right? And someone here just trying to to clear the plates, to try and make Trina's husband happy and successful in whatever ways I can. And sometimes it even works.
Right. That sweet spot, that thing that, you see hundreds, thousands of works and you're remembering one, that thing that stops you in your tracks, that idea that, is the one that grabs you. Can any of you, kind of throw a dart at that and articulate what that little thing is that says, yep, that's it, as opposed to all this other stuff?
It's like the $100 million question, though.
It's the topic
No
of the
kidding.
conversation.
Do you want to get one?
Oh yeah. No, wait. I've been thinking in about art recently and what makes art enduring and more interesting over time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's usually I love the idea once in physics that they would talk about a property of strangeness. And I think that there has to be something in it that's a little bit mysterious. I think in music, I always look for things, and in art now, with a blue note in them. And it's part of a jazz and music background, but if it's just pretty, that's great, but it's not going to be satisfying for long. It's got to have something a little strange or a little off in it, a little maybe not disturbing necessarily, but troubling, or something that kind of hooks you. And I think that's what I look for in various fields or various ways.
I love
So-
that
so it's
property of
fun-
strangeness.
I have to say though, so this is a conversation. As I was thinking about this discussion, I was reminded of a conversation I had with a friend of mine. This friend wrote the musical Avenue Q, and that was a very strange musical at the time, right? You didn't have puppets. You certainly didn't have swearing. In fact, when he was writing these first songs in a workshop, and it was like, and the songs were about fuckity fuck, or whatever. People were like, "What? This is a musical,"
With puppets.
And then it won the Tony for Best Musical. It was this amazing thing. And so I was having this conversation with him about which would you rather invest in? Would you rather invest in Mamma Mia or the next Sondheim musical, right? And I said, oh, I'd absolutely invest in the next Sondheim musical. It's not a question. And he was like, then you're an idiot. Like, of course you want to invest in Mamma Mia. It will make you a ton of money. I say, yeah, but I wouldn't invest in a musical for the sake of the money. I would invest in a musical for the sake of the art. My day job is for the money. And so, but Mamma Mia has no blue note, right? There's nothing Avenue Q did, Hamilton does.
Right.
But, so I think,
But I like ABBA too. I mean,
but,
I have
you know,
to say.
right, no, that's so it just,
True confessions.
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
for every, this is the trickiest part for all of our jobs, which is for every rule that we can come up with,
Yeah.
there's an extraordinary example of why that's a stupid rule.
Yeah.
Which means you can't be doctrinal. You can't
Right.
you go in every day going, I've got this, I have 16 years worth of being a VC and experience and all these things, and I hope that they don't mislead me in year 17, because I would have then seen that amazing author, that amazing artist, or that amazing company.
Well, there's that story that I always remember, the dealer Alan Stone, who worked in New York for years, and he always told the story about two artists came in the gallery the same day and left their work with them, and he was just going back and forth over which one he wanted to start working with, and I think someone came in and he showed them, one of them was Wayne Thiebaud on one side, and he turned the piece over, and the other side he had put up on some boards, and the other side was Andy Warhol. And so that's,
Wow.
and he just sort of he just reacted to one in the moment, and Wayne Thiebaud became his man, and that was sort of defined his business going forward and his whole program. So it's, I think there's absolutely intangibles. It's timing. There's got to,
Trust, faith.
yeah. I wish someone could give me that formula. I would
Wait,
take it.
one more story just like this about intellectual property and this sense of lack of certainty or whatever. Steven Spielberg and George Lucas were buddies when they were making movies growing up through the movie industry, and they had both made a movie, and they showed their respective movies to each other and said, and each one said, that movie is amazing. It is going to be the biggest hit we've ever seen. And the other one said, no, your movie is amazing. It's the biggest hit you've ever seen. And they actually did something quite unusual, which is they traded 1% of the respective films. Spielberg got 1% of Lucas's, and Lucas got 1% of Spielberg's. And Spielberg's was E.T., which was an incredible movie and made a huge amount of money. And Lucas's was Star Wars. And so, Tebow's amazing. And a Warhol would have been probably
There's not
even
a
more
wrong answer
amazing,
there.
right? So we should all be so lucky that those are our choices,
Yes.
because usually it's like not Tebow and not Warhol.
I have a few minutes because Ray told me I had wiggle room, so I just wondered if people had questions. Yeah.
Me.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested in trends, like in all of your lines of work, and how do you guys do you guys look at trends? Do you try to detect patterns of your own? Do you listen to what other people tell you is hot right now or something like that? And how does it inform your decision making?
I will say that I do listen to and look at and recognize. I don't follow them. I try actually not to, and the majority of my artists I've worked with for 20 years, so they're not usually picking up, they're sort of on their path. I don't know, it's tricky, because there's certainly some things that will come up that I find very compelling and interesting, and it's important because it's in the ether and it informs what's happening in the art world. So you have to pay attention. And sometimes, but and if I'm able to respond to it, it's usually in group shows where I can sort of say,
Right.
this is an interesting trend that I'm seeing, and how does it relate to some of the other art that I'm showing?
Nion, it must be a little bit different for you in terms of trends.
Well, sometimes we try to, we have jumped on trends.
Get out in front.
I don't think, I prefer it, when you find something that's interesting to you, and then you look and see if it is a trend or it's part of a trend, and then you pretty much know you're on the right track. Otherwise, if you're just trying to knock something off, it may have some commercial value, but to me, it's not that interesting. It's just a pure, business proposition, generally. And but I think it's I like trends. I think it's interesting to know what's going on.
Well, I think it's a different, it's that where we started, that perceived value and that kind of sort of inflation of an idea or a piece of art or a idea for a book or an entrepreneur's next best thing, that it does get inflated in some odd way, and who sets that trend? That's a marketing thing, really, more than a value in the particular thing itself, right? What would you say about trends? You, on the other hand.
Yeah, no, I've been on a bunch of boards for more than 10 years, right? So if you worry about trends, the likelihood is that the trend will come and go in the lifetime of the company I've been sitting on. What you hope for is that you invest in something that becomes a trend, right? I always describe it investing in startups in sort of surfing terms. I'm not a surfer, but if you watch surfers right there, if you're paddling up late, there's a trend coming, right? And you paddle up late, you miss it. The power of the wave goes, and whoops, too bad. If you get there too early, you're like, I totally see this coming, and you paddle out, and then the trend comes, and it slams on your head, and you're like, oh darn it, I was too early. And so you have to start paddling before the trend actually hits, which means you have to just sort of be a little bit lucky or a little bit prescient, and then the trend drives you to victory, the shore. Your artists have these great successes or whatever, and so you can't really, by the time you recognize the trend, that wave is already well past you, is my experience.
Other questions? Yeah, Byron.
Yeah, this this is a question from a collecting point of view and trying to take into account some of what I've heard. And that is focused on emerging artists or people who are emerging and getting not quite to mid-career. But as a collector, to look at artists' work and see that like what they've done and are really happy with what they're doing now and are really believing that they're going to be successful later on. Now I buy a piece. And I'm wondering from a gallery point of view, what if I offer to buy a piece and also buy a future as an investment, not as an investment to sell later, but an investment in that person's art, who oftentimes 3 or 4 years later, I can't afford that artist anymore that I purchased, and now I'm buying a future piece of art from this artist that I believe in. Is that a proposition that you would consider?
Well, I think owning a piece of art by any artist is investing in them and their long-term career, right?
No, that's true, but oftentimes I find, wow, I really like that person. Now I can't afford that person anymore. So now I'm going to put up, instead of $2,000 for one piece, I'll put up $4,000, and in the future to have an option on another piece that I can't afford at the going rate 3 years hence.
I don't even know what to say to them.
Would an
So,
artist-
so-
would an
I
artist
think-
think that?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, if someone, I
It's
can
the
imagine.
time value of money.
Annie Leibovitz had this situation actually come up for her. I don't know if anyone followed her career, but she, all of her money, her financial manager ran off with all of her money. And Vanity Fair came to her rescue and said, we're going to hire you and we're going to invest in you long term. And, that was a more commercial venture. And she was trained as a fine art photographer and is, a household name because of Vanity Fair. But I think that, there are artists and there are times when artists are in dire straits and someone will come to their rescue and offer to purchase a lot of work at a very low price to help them out long term. And, I don't know that anyone's going to be able to transactionally give you a deal towards a future in someone's career. And I think investing in that way in art is the wrong way to approach it, quite frankly. But I think that, if you believe in someone, you could always go to them and work out a deal. Like, I want to help you in your career. What is the most helpful thing to you in getting you down the road?
So we've done this in a couple of different capacities, right? Which is, now one is tricky, which is you're betting on the future of the artist, and so you say, I'd love to donate your art to a museum, but the museum has to already recognize that this artist is compelling. So that's I've learned that it's not as easy as saying, hey, gee, we'd like to give you this. Museums are like, that's great, thanks, no. But if they say yes, that's fantastic, and we've had a number of instances where we love artists and we say, let us just donate, we'll buy the art and give it to you, and museums say, great. That's fantastic for the museum. It's also fantastic for you as an owner of that art. We don't actually buy art because we think I think of my day job as investing in startups, and the rest of it is so that I can support things that I'm excited about. Another example is a great artist we loved who wanted to get a show together, and we ended up helping publish a book on the show. And it was great. Got a bunch of copies of the book, which I gave out to friends, and the book got published, and the artist got to use it as part of the show. So I think there are lots of instances where there are people who would love to do a set of things. They don't have the resources to do it. And by being helpful in that regard, you're helping their career. And then the last answer is just if you like it, buy 2 of them, because the stuff that you bought before is going to be valuable when you can't afford the stuff later in the future too, right? So
yeah, well, I'm not interested so much in the value of the piece that I've just purchased and what it's going to be worth in the future. I'm just looking at things that I bought, and I know that artist, or believe in my heart that an artist is going to be really successful, and when they are, then they're priced out of my budget. And I'd like to have a future.
No, but
Buy a bunch of them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was going to say the same thing.
trade out the ones you had
Buy
for
a lot.
something new,
Or
right?
something new.
I have a deal for you.
And any one last question? Okay, please join me in thanking Nion and Katrina and David.